2023. I would like to convene the regular meeting. My name is David Giannetti. I'll be standing in for our chairman, Richard Antonetti, who is in attendance virtually via Zoom, but as many of you know, is still recovering from some medical issues, so he's asked me to chair the meeting. So again, this is the Wednesday, March 8th, 2023 meeting of the Watertown Police Commission. It is an in-person and virtual regular meeting. And I'll start off with roll call.
Jamie Lambeau.
Richard Rossi.
Carmine Vernal.
Robert McCarthy.
David Giannetti. And then we also have our chief, Josh Bernegger, and our deputy chief, Dominguez. I would also like to acknowledge that we have our town manager, Mark Ramo, in attendance tonight. And we also have two members of our town council, Marianne Rosa and Herman DeCina. Thank you for attending. And I'm sorry, Gary Lafferty. I don't know how I forgot Gary. I said hello to him on the way in. Sorry, Gary. And then also we're going to be sitting Carmine Vernal as a regular member of the commission tonight. And we can move on to public participation. Would any members of the public wish to address the commission at this time? If so, please come up to the desk here and speak directly into the mic. And I ask that you give your name and address to start, please.
Oh, okay. Frank Genova, 104 Pleasant View Avenue, Oakville, Connecticut. I have a few questions yet. I skipped a couple of months. But the gate, the Bernegger gate on Watertown High School, it seems like nothing's getting done about it. And I just have a few questions. This is like 6 months now since the first meeting I came to. I came to 4 meetings and I skipped the last 2. I get asked the same questions all the time, but now I hope somebody up here remembers the first 2 months, the superintendent of the school was also here, and she came up, and she said, because of all the cars, because of the coronavirus, they blamed it on. Then she said she was going to do a traffic study. Does anybody remember that? So when I'm here after 6 months of the traffic study, it should be done by now, right? So I'd like to know what happened with that.
Mr. Genova, you're referring to the gate at Watertown High School, correct?
Right, in the back, the rear gate.
Yeah, we did vote on that a couple of months ago at our regular meeting, and we did advise the superintendent to keep the gate shut, but we also gave them the authority, the superintendent and the principal of the school, the authority to open the gate under certain circumstances.
Right.
So that gate should remain closed. That gate should be closed on a regular basis unless there are exceptional circumstances.
It's closed during the day, which is a good thing. But it's open, and they come out of there. I'm going to show you a picture, but first let me finish. And I'm still about the traffic study. You must have got the results from that by now. It's been 6 months, right? Or was it ever done?
Well, I know that the public school system did engage in a traffic study with either John Trumbull School or Watertown High School or both. But again, the ruling from the police commission, I believe 2 months ago, was to keep that gate closed at Watertown High School. And we did allow for the superintendent and the principal of the high school, under exigent circumstances, to open that gate.
I'm not following you too much because I'm having a hard time hearing you talk, and can I come up there a little closer and you can explain it to me?
Can we do that after the meeting, sir?
Pardon?
I'll explain it to you after the meeting.
All right.
Okay.
Then why is that the only gate in the town of Watertown in the school system that doesn't have a stop sign, except the other in Watertown, which has a light? Now, I know the police, I talked to him, he doesn't have the, it's not his job to do that, how I said it. There's a gate that you don't even use in the high school that got a stop sign, but the one you use don't have a stop sign? Nobody could put a stop sign there? 2 years, 2 years I've been trying to get a stop sign put there. You don't think that's a little crazy? 2 years.
Again, we did rule that for them to keep that gate shut. We did rule for them to keep that gate shut.
The gate's gonna be shut from now on? No.
The gate has been shut.
That gate's not gonna be open no more?
The gate is shut.
It's permanently shut?
Shut.
Okay, then that's, I'm happy. Because last time I just went by there, I thought it was open. All right.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Again, please state your name and address and speak into the microphone.
Hi, Mark Severino, 318 Bayview Circle. So I've been living at the four-way intersection of Bayview, Killerman Road, and Wheeler Farm for more than 2 years now. I work from home and have 3 young children, 2 of which are right here. I finally reached my boiling point, watching out my office window all day as cars fly through the stop sign at the intersection. I'm not referring to a rolling stop. I'm referring to people accelerating through the sign without even a tap of the brakes. Obviously, I don't have to describe how dangerous this is. Last week, I witnessed 3 cars go through at full speed at the critical 3 to 4 p.m. hour when buses are dropping off kids. The offenders run the gamut from residents cutting through to and from Guernsey Town Road, contractors, delivery trucks, and shockingly, even propane trucks. There are several residents in the neighborhood who have had close calls coming down from Bayview and about to go left or right, only to have a car on Killerman fly past them, narrowly avoiding a collision. Some of these residents have also submitted statements or are here tonight. I implore this commission and the town of Watertown to do something to prevent this very dangerous situation from becoming a tragedy, especially as the warm weather approaches and children are out on bikes, chasing basketballs, etc. I'm not an expert in traffic control, but I would like to think that something along the lines of extra signage, more pronounced lines, larger illuminated stop signs, or even speed bumps would reduce these infractions. The neighborhood would also warmly welcome extra police patrol, but I do not believe that would help on its own without other measures in place. Thank you all for your consideration in this matter, and I'm happy to support the town in any way I can to ensure we keep our neighborhood as safe as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Severino. And I believe we do have correspondence perhaps from other neighbors up there that we're going to hear about tonight. And
Yep.
We will be adding this to our regular agenda meeting for next month.
Okay, do you want Angela to read it, or to read her statement, or?
Absolutely. Would
Okay.
you please state your name and address, please?
Angela Barbieri, 228 Bayview Circle, Watertown, Connecticut. Good evening, and thank you for taking the time to hear our concerns. My name is Angela Barbieri, and I've lived on Bayview Circle for almost 7 years. In the last few years, I've seen an uptick in traffic traveling throughout the intersection that crosses Bayview, Killerman, and Wheeler Farm. Within the last few years, I've witnessed cars, trucks, work vans, and other vehicles slowly roll through the stop sign, turn through the stop signs without hesitation, and worst of all, completely ignore the stop signs, driving through at an alarming speed, completely unfazed. In a neighborhood where there are many residents taking walks, pushing strollers, walking with their dogs or children, and children playing and riding their bikes, it's scary to witness drivers come so quickly and without hesitation through this four-way stop. I'm quite honestly surprised that there hasn't been an incident or an accident in this area sooner, and I hope to God it never happens for this reason. It is completely avoidable. Aside from what I've witnessed, I have had personal experiences within the last few months alone, where I was driving in the car with my 3 young children and husband on various occasions and stopped at the stop sign waiting for our turn to safely turn, and had cars, trucks, work vans, and even on one instance, a postal service worker in the USPS postal truck, which I caught the number of and later reported to the postmaster, speed through the stop sign with absolutely no awareness or regard for anyone around them. They don't even look around or hesitate, they just keep going. I've had similar experiences walking with my children and pushing them in the stroller. I've been at the stop sign with them at the bottom of Bayview Circle as we go for a walk and have had to explain to them numerous times that we have to watch for cars because they don't always watch for us. Even with my very small children and baby with me on a walk, people don't hesitate to drive quickly right through the stop sign. It doesn't feel safe, and unfortunately, it seems like it's becoming common practice for vehicles in that area to bypass and ignore the stop signs at this intersection. I worry for the safety of the residents in this neighborhood and the neighborhoods around, as well as anyone else driving, that something will eventually happen as a result of these careless drivers. I ask that something be done to help remedy the issue for overall safety of everyone living in and traveling through this area. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else from the public like to address the Police Commission at this time?
Al Mickle, 95 Woodvine Avenue. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity for public participation. It's a key issue in communicating with the public, and it's appreciated tonight. What I would ask the commission to do is to send a message to the town council supporting the police chief's request for 3 police officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mickle. And I believe we've already done that, correct, Chief? Would anyone else like to address the Police Commission? Any other members of the public would like to address the Police Commission? Final call for public participation. Okay, thank you, everyone who came up to address the commission. And now I'd like to move to agenda item number 4, approval of the February 8th, 2023 regular meeting minutes. This does require a motion.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
I have to abstain on the vote on this. Richard Antonetti.
Okay, I believe that's Chairman Antonetti. And I believe that's an abstention, correct, Mr. Antonetti?
Correct.
And we also have an abstention from Jamie Lambo. The motion does carry. And we'll move on to item number 5, correspondence. Chief, I understand that you may have some other correspondence regarding the intersection at Bayview, Killeran, and Wheeler Farm Road. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have 3 emails that were sent in regards to this particular intersection that I can read into the minutes if you like.
Please, thank you, Chief.
The first is from a Noelle Germain, although I don't have an exact address, but she's a Bayview Circle resident. Her correspondence reads as follows. Dear Chief Bernegger, members of the Watertown Police Department and Police Commission, thank you for allowing us this opportunity to express our collective concern regarding traffic at the intersection of Killeran Road and Bayview Circle in Watertown. I am unable to attend this meeting in person, but am writing as a concerned resident of the Bayview Circle neighborhood. I have, on countless occasions, witnessed complete disregard for the 4-way stop at this intersection. As I drive out of my neighborhood daily, I take a left off of Bayview and onto Killeran and head towards Litchfield Road. In at least 2 instances, after stopping at my stop sign and preparing to take a left turn, I've narrowly avoided being hit by vehicles traveling at a high speed on Killeran and not stopping at the 4-way stop. Visibility of the intersection heading west on Killeran is extremely poor as it is uphill. I feel that adding signage to warn of the 4-way stop ahead of the actual stop is warranted. I often walk our wonderful neighborhood with my 2 young children and our dog. We prefer to ride our bikes along Bayview and down onto Wheeler Farm. Crossing the intersection at Bayview and Killeran has become extremely dangerous, and I fear it is a matter of time before there is an incident there between vehicles traveling on Killeran and one of many neighbors and neighborhood children who also enjoy walking this route. I have lost count of the number of times I have witnessed vehicles cross through the 4-way stop without even pausing to check for crossing traffic, vehicle, or pedestrian. This is the case for vehicles traveling from both directions on Killeran. I understand that this is a main throughway connecting Guernsey Town Road to Litchfield Road, but I strongly urge the town of Watertown to evaluate traffic through this intersection in the interest of protecting the safety of members of our neighborhood. Thank you again for your consideration. Noelle Germain, Bayview Circle resident. Second correspondence is from Thank you. Denise Keene of Wheeler Farm. Good evening. I am requesting that this message please be read at the meeting on March 8th. I am sick and unable to attend. My name is Denise Keene. I have been living on Wheeler Farm for 4 years. I have 2 school-age children that attend Watertown schools. Whether at the bus stop, morning and afternoon, or walking the neighborhood, I have witnessed cars not stopping at the intersection of Wheeler, Bayview, and Killeran more often than not. Something must be done to ensure pedestrian safety. In order to cross the street, we stick together, make sure there are no cars, and run. If there is a car even far away, we wait because the chances of that car not stopping are too great. While in my car approaching the same intersection, I've witnessed other cars that do not stop. They don't even seem to slow down. This happens during the daylight hours and night when it's dark. We need your help. Thank you for sending out patrol cars in the past, but we recognize that the officers cannot sit there for an extended period of time until someone cruises through the stop sign. Is it possible that there is another solution? Thank you for your time and attention to our neighborhood concerns. Last correspondence is from Danielle Vitale of 262 Bayview Circle. Good afternoon, my name is Danielle Vitale. We live at 262 Bayview Circle. I understand that we have an agenda regarding a stop sign at our intersection of Killeran and Bayview Circle. We have a lot of people that it says don't blow right through the intersection. It may be a typo. Also would like to propose a solar street light on Bayview. It is extremely dark. With current uptick in car break-ins in our neighborhood, it may help as well. Hope to get a resolution to our issues. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any other items of correspondence?
I have nothing further.
Thank you. I do appreciate you reading those. Okay, we'll move on to item number 6, new business. By the way, we will be adding the Bayview, Killeran, Wheeler Farm Road intersection issue to new business for the April 2023 meeting. So move on to item number 6, new business. We have a special presentation tonight by members of the Center for Policing Equity, and they'll be presenting the report on the Watertown Police Department, and after which there'll be a question and answer session to follow their presentation. And Chief, if you would please introduce our guest and perhaps talk about, give us a little background about the purpose of the study and why you requested it.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Police Commission. In February of 2019, the Watertown Police Department initiated a partnership with a nonprofit organization, Center for Policing Equity. This relationship was sought after in the spirit of complete transparency and the Watertown Police Department's commitment to self-reflection and learning. Our mission statement here at the Watertown Police Department is, quote, to provide the Watertown Oakville community with exemplary law enforcement services strengthened through community partnerships, transparency, and an unyielding commitment to perform to the highest standards, end quote. Our relationship with the Center for Policing Equity is one example of a community partnership that our mission statement speaks of. Our ultimate goal is to make certain we are providing the best police service to the Watertown Oakville community in a manner free of bias to the extent possible. As this presentation will detail, the Watertown Police Department shared 8 years of data with CPE, covering the years 2013 through 2020. CPE conducted an analysis of this data, and their findings will be presented here this evening. Working with the staff at CPE has been a very positive experience and a partnership truly valued. CPE is committed to assisting their partnered agencies with self-improvement, and they do so without judgment or criticism. We look forward to continuing our partnership with CPE in the future. And before I continue, I'd just like to turn the floor over to our town manager, Mark Ramo, who's with us this evening, and I'd just like to say a couple words.
Good evening, Mark Ramo, Town Manager. I just wanted to say thank you to the Watertown Police Department with all the hard work that they do under the leadership of Deputy Chief Dominguez and Chief Bernegger. They're out there every day doing a lot of work to keep our community safe. I became involved in this many months ago, and I kind of feel privileged to have been involved in these conversations. I'd like to thank Mr. Riddick, along with the Center of Policing Equity. What I took away from these conversations mostly was that it was open and honest communication, which gave us better understanding of what possible issues could arise if we don't pay attention. So I look forward to tonight's presentation, and I hope that everybody in attendance takes an opportunity to ask a question to better understand the process of this policing equity presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Also in our audience this evening, I'd just like to point out several other partners of the Watertown Police Department who are in attendance tonight. We have Lauren Pristo from the Litchfield County Opioid Task Force, Steve Yannick from Crime Stoppers. Please, anybody else who's, did I miss anybody? From Greenwoods Counseling, which works with the Litchfield County Opioid Task Force, Greenwoods Counseling, and the Opioid Task Force. We're partnered with in attempts to help and provide services to those vulnerable members of our community who suffer from substance abuse disorder. That being said, I would like to welcome our guests from the Center for Policing Equity. We have tonight with us in person Ms. Kiana West, along with Mr. Evan Riddick, Matthew Graham, and Ileana Mendoza, who will be joining us virtually to present their findings and report. And following this presentation, attendees will have the opportunity to ask questions or provide comment, as well as those listening virtually may raise their hand. At this time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to the Center for Policing Equity to present their report. Mr. Simmons, if you could allow them presenter access and unmute their microphones. Mr. Riddick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning. I would first and foremost thank you all for inviting us. You know, again, we really want to center the community in these conversations, but to just open it up, I would like to pass it over to my colleague, Ileana.
Evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I would like to send a special thank you to the Watertown Police Department and the Police Commission for inviting us to participate in your meeting. I first want to introduce myself. My name is Ileana Mendoza, and I am a Senior Community Engagement Coordinator at the Center for Policing Equity, and will be your facilitator today. On behalf of our co-founders, Dr. Philip Atibe-Goff and Dr. Tracy Cassie, I want to welcome all of you to this presentation of the findings of our Justice Navigator Assessment on the Watertown Police Department with my colleagues from CPE and Chief Bernegger from the Watertown Police Department. We understand that while reports and conversation are critical in pushing the needle towards justice and action, solutions produce real change to our public safety systems. I'm hopeful that this presentation can spark discussion and around solutions to bring about change. Next slide. I'm joined on this virtual panel by my colleagues, Evan Riddick, Implementation Strategist on our Law Enforcement Initiatives team, and Matthew Graham, a Senior Data Analyst on our Justice Navigator team. My colleague, Kiana West, Senior Community Engagement Coordinator, has joined in person along with Chief Bernegger. Thank you for being here tonight. Next slide, please. We have a very informative agenda in store for you today. First, Evan Riddick will provide some context into the history of our relationship with the Watertown Police Department and the goals of our engagement. Following that, Matthew Graham will walk through the findings of our Justice Navigator Assessment, which is available online at justicenavigator.org, which will cover our analysis of Watertown vehicle stops and calls for service. I will then speak to the next steps of our engagement in Watertown, how community members can get involved in our work, and some of the tools and resources we provide alongside the assessment. We'll then open up for a Q&A session to answer any questions you may have for us or the chief. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Evan Riddick.
Thank you, Ileana. Once again, good evening, everyone. First and foremost, thank you to the town council, town manager, community, and the Watertown Police Department for inviting us Again, my name is Evan Riddick. Just a little bit about myself. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I served the city as a city commissioner, community organizer, as well as a Philadelphia police officer for the Philadelphia Police Department. I joined CPE in 2021 as an implementation strategist. So in my current role at CPE, I bring my experiences and serve as a bridge between law enforcement and CPE. I currently assist police leaders, their agencies, their city leadership, in understanding the law enforcement agencies' data, which they provide to CPE, and guide them through our Justice Navigator analysis process, which we'll learn about in just a few short moments. So over the past year, I've had the pleasure and privilege to work with Chief Bernegger and Deputy Dominguez of the Watertown Police Department as I joined CPE again in 2021, and commend his commitment and endeavor to ensure that the Watertown Police Department practices are fair and equitable while centering the community in these conversations. So just to start, who is CPE and what do we do? CPE was founded in 2008 by Dr. Philip Atiba-Goff and Dr. Tracy Cassie, our COO. CPE is a nonprofit organization committed to change through actions backed by data, research, working alongside communities and law enforcement agencies. So we're comprised of research scientists, race and equity specialists, policy experts, data experts, former law enforcement, and former law enforcement leaders and community engagement specialists. We combine data on law enforcement practices with community feedback to create levers for social, cultural, and policy change. We use science to advocate for large and meaningful change in public safety by conducting analysis that identify racial disparities and aim to bridge the divide of communication, intergenerational mistrust, and pain. We hope for reconciliation between communities and the departments they put their trust into. So CPE wants to help accomplish this by centering communities in these conversations. Next slide. So what has been accomplished so far with the Watertown Police Department? So our partnership began in 2019 when the Watertown Police Department voluntarily partnered with us to participate in the National Justice Database, for which they provide data for this assessment. The National Justice Database, or NJD for short, as we like to call here at CPE, is the largest collection of recorded police behaviors related to the outcomes of the interactions with citizens. So the idea behind this really, in this database, is to build trust, legitimacy, and confidence in the law enforcement community through transparency. So the NJD is strictly a research database for CPE researchers and scientists. However, the NJD data provided by the Watertown Police Department voluntarily and determined by CPE to meet data standards through an extensive process are fed and analyzed in our Justice Navigator assessment, as I mentioned prior. CPE has provided Watertown PD with an analysis of the data they provided at no cost to the department. This is crucial because it shows our partnership stands on transparency, real conversations, and hard facts. CPE has analyzed outcomes on vehicle stops from October 2013, December 2020, and calls for service and officer activities from January 1st, 2014 to July 1st, 2020. Next slide, please. So, as researchers, social scientists, policy experts, community organizers, and former law enforcement, we understand that this issue is bigger than law enforcement alone. We have these conversations because we understand and recognize the failure to value Black life and poor communities. This change must come through research and data. We also must recognize that this data we discuss are people's lives, security, and civil liberties. Once we understand this, only then can we make real change in public safety and law enforcement throughout the United States. So what's the goal? The goal of analyzing this data is to examine whether some racial groups in Watertown, Connecticut experience more frequent police contact than other groups, identify any racial disparities in police interactions with the community, and provide areas for further investigations that the Watertown Police Department can use to address and identify disparities. We at CPE like to call this a baseline report, or just the beginning of a long partnership we hope to continue. We want to help the Watertown Police Department understand where they are and what steps they can take to improve, as well as add to their own efforts. Ownership of this data is never easy, and the Center for Policing Equity is open to at the beginning of our partnership, that ownership of any disparate data is critical in this conversation. And this is something I really had to thank Chief Bernegger and the Watertown Police Department for acknowledging and really owning and continuing to push this conversation forward. So this is a critical part in our relationship and pursuit for equity and fairness. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our senior data analyst, Matt Graham, who will present the Watertown Police Department Justice Navigator Assessment. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Evan. Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Graham. I'm the Senior Data Analyst on the Justice Navigator project, and I'm going to walk you through some of the key findings. This is not all of the findings. The full report can be found online at justicenavigator.org. So first, just a quick overview of the department in the town context. The Watertown Police Department has 40 officers serving a community of about 21,000. It's a majority white community with 91% of the population being white. Nearly 5% of the population is Latinx and 2% is Black. And I'm going to walk you through two sections of findings. The first is vehicle stops, and the second is calls for service and officer-initiated activity. And so as Evan spoke about, we are a Center for Policing Equity. So what we're looking at here is whether there's evidence of any racial disparities, differences in how people of different racial groups experience policing in your community. So first, looking at vehicle stops, we see that white people make up 83% of the people stopped. Latinx people make up 7.5% of the people stopped. Black people make up 7.2% of people stopped. And as we saw in the previous slide, Black people make up about 2% of the population. Latinx people make up about 4.5% of the population. So we typically, would like to see the percentage of people of any given racial group who are stopped be pretty closely aligned with their share of the population. And here we do see that the percentage of Black and Latinx people who are stopped is not wildly out of sync with the demographics of the town. So that's a good sign. Just looking at the number of vehicle stops per year, it really fluctuates. There's no real pattern. It goes from 1,100 in 2015 up to a high of just under 3,000 in 2019. You see the steep drop-off in 2020. We've seen that in a lot of communities we work with, likely due to COVID. There may be other factors, but people not commuting much, not going out much, you're not going to have as many vehicles on the road. So the one area where we did see evidence of racial disparities was in the search rates. So once stopped, Black and Latinx drivers were both searched 4 times as often as white people. So for every 1,000 stops of Black or of Latinx people, 48 of them were searched, while for every 1,000 stops of white people, 11 of them were searched. One common, explanation or justification for this, people say, well, Black and Latinx people are more likely to commit crimes or more likely to have contraband on them. And what we see is that's actually not the case here. So Black people stopped 4 times as often as white people. Searched 4 times as often as white people. They actually had contraband found on them less often. So 44% of Black people searched had contraband found on them. That could be drugs, weapons, stolen property, anything that's illegal to possess. So 44% of Black people compared to 50% of white people. Similarly, for Latinx people, 56% of those searched had contraband found on them, compared to 50% for white people. So even though the contraband found rate is higher for Latinx people than for white people, it's about 1.2 times higher, whereas the search rate is more than 4 times higher. So, we would say that the difference in contraband being found does not justify or warrant that disparity in the search rates. But in the other things we've measured, we don't see much in the way of racial disparities. So one thing we see in a lot of communities for vehicle stop reason is that Black and Latinx people will be stopped more often for equipment like license or registration stops, and those can often be pretextual stops. So police are pulling them over, there is some minor violation, a taillight's out, their license is expired, but the officers are using that as a reason to do further investigation, maybe initiate a search. And we don't see that in your community. The percentages for all of the stop reasons are fairly similar across all racial groups, so that's good. Similar with stop outcome, we see that the percentage of people of each racial group who are arrested was pretty much the same across the board. So different racial groups are not experiencing stop reasons or stop outcomes differently, which is a good sign and doesn't show any evidence of disparities. So really the search disparity, the number of Black and Latinx people who are searched is the only one that really stands out. And switching to calls for service and officer-initiated activity. So this is about what the community is calling officers to do and what officers are doing when they initiated activities themselves. So this is not so much, we're not looking at racial disparities in the same way here. There's not as much clear-cut evidence of what constitutes, good or bad results or patterns. This is more information for you and your community to talk about what policing does look like in your community and what it could or should look like. So, some of the conversations happening nationally right now are really about, what role should the police have? For decades, we've just been giving them more and more responsibility because they're the people who are available when you need someone. But there are a lot of things that they're being asked to respond to that they're not trained for. So first of all, just looking at total calls, one of the kind of preconceived notions that we have throughout this country is that officers are running from a theft call to a robbery to an assault. They're going from serious call to serious call with very little time in between. And what we see here and in a lot of other communities that we've looked at is that actually those really serious calls only make up about 5% of what officers are doing. So bodily harm includes things like assault, sexual assault, homicide. Property harm is, theft, any taking of property, auto vehicle theft, etc. Threats is, anything that would make a person feel like they could be subject to imminent harm. This could be stalking, it could be harassment, anything along those lines. So anything where you would want and expect an officer to show up very quickly, that's what that category encompasses. And then here we've removed what we've identified as officer-initiated activities, and we're just looking at calls for service. So when people call the police, usually via 911, what are they asking the police to do? And we see by far the largest category is public assistance. And that includes things like a disabled vehicle, an abandoned vehicle, roadway obstruction, someone found property or someone lost property, and they're either returning it or trying to find it. A vehicle needs to be towed, there's an animal complaint, right? So these are things that are not, immediate public safety concerns or threats. And then the second largest category is medical/fire. And we've removed any calls that would have been sent to the fire department or EMS as the primary responder. So these are all calls where officers are going as secondary responders. And then the other, big area of discussion is mental health calls. So Watertown, over this time period, was involved in at least 580 mental health calls. And we've seen in other communities, they have established alternative response models where either an officer responds to the call along with a medical health professional or a social worker, or the social worker or mental health professional responds in lieu of the police. And the police only show up if they're called in for backup. And these programs have been really successful in the numerous categories that have implemented them. And referencing the previous slide about sort of those non-police essential calls, we've seen communities that have stood up. Like for example, if you have a traffic accident, you need to call the cops, not because you actually need an officer there for any, like a crime has been committed or someone's injured, but just because you need a report for insurance purposes. We've seen other communities train city workers who aren't cops to respond to those types of calls. And so that frees up officers to do the work that really requires them to be responding. And so if you go to the calls for service and officer initiated activity tab in the Justice Navigator, you'll see much more detail about the types of calls that officers are responding to. And that can fuel these conversations about, as I said, what are the police doing? What does policing look like in Watertown? And is that what the community wants the police to be doing? Or are there other things that could be shifted to non-police responders? And now I'm going to hand it back to Evan for discussion of next steps.
Thank you, Matt. So what are our next steps here? So we at CPE think it's critical to not really do this work in a vacuum. We really want to supply your community with the knowledge and the tools to work with your police department because you put their trust in them. We want to supply not only the law enforcement agency, but the community with the tools to help them shape and push their agencies towards equitable policing. So in our conversations, and even in our in-person discussions, I know everything has been virtual for a long time now. The chief has expressed that he wanted to continue our partnership. If you could go to the next slide. He did want to continue our partnership in order to identify ways to collect better data. And this is really an important step. Change won't happen overnight, and that's something that we here at CPE and the Watertown Police Department recognize. So we look to try and continue to supply the department and community with the tools to measure and monitor change over time, whether that looks at supplying us with new data to see how they have changed over the years, to changing policies, and to just assuring that they continue to work with the community based off their changes as they change over time. And I'm positive that the chief can share more of this with you all. But with this, I'd like to pass it back to my colleague, Eliana.
Thanks, Evan. Here at CPE, we believe that the ultimate measure of our success is the safety and well-being of the communities we serve. Because of that, your voice is central to the work that we're trying to do. And we're offering a few ways for you to speak about your experiences and goals in terms of public safety and racial justice, either with us or your neighbors. Feel free, next slide. Matt, thank you. Feel free to scan the QR code on the screen to stay connected with us with the work that we're doing in Watertown and in Connecticut. This will also allow you to schedule a call with us and begin co-creating solutions to reduce harm and reimagine public safety. As mentioned earlier, Keanu West is in person today and is able to chat after this presentation. Next slide. Our Justice Navigator resources can help communities and law enforcement agencies understand data, assess solutions, take action to reduce racial disparities in policing, and design equitable public safety systems. If interested in learning more about policing data, we provide a deeper dive into the policing data and the data analysis process in general, which includes a glossary of key terms that break down some of the jargon used by folks in this field, and a video that walks through a sample Justice Navigator assessment to help you understand the different types of analysis we conduct and what they mean. We also have guidelines on how to find, understand, and analyze policing data even if your department does not have a Justice Navigator assessment. There is content for those who are just looking to get a basic understanding of policing in America. This includes a brief overview of the origins and history of policing in this country, the types of law enforcement agencies that typically operate in your area, and the work they do and personnel involved. All this information is geared towards helping community members take action to shape the models of public safety they would like to see. As a reminder, this information is available on the Justice Navigator website at justicenavigator.com and at policingequity.org. Next slide. CPE has released a new redesigned public safety resource series that outlines a new vision for some of the most pressing public safety issues Black and brown communities face. You can find the link in the chat, or you connect with Kiana for a copy. The first white paper examines a variety of approaches to traffic safety and offers strategies for building road safety systems that are just, equitable, and safe. The other white paper focuses on the intersection of community safety and mental health. This paper shows the impact of what happens when armed officers respond to these calls for help, support, or services, which, if they were resolved via other solutions, would actually increase public safety. Next slide. This concludes our presentation for this evening, and with that, we'll open up for Q&A. And just to remind you who is here to answer your questions, I invite my fellow panelists to reintroduce themselves, starting with Evan.
Thanks again, Eliana. Once again, for those that may have just showed up or may have just showed up in the chat, my name is Evan Riddick. I am from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I have a background in policy and community engagement. I have a Bachelor's of Science from Penn State University and a master's degree from Northeastern University. And I also have a background in law enforcement as I serve for the Philadelphia Police Department. So thank you. And I'll hand it over to Matt.
Yeah, hi again, everyone. I'm Matt Graham. I'm the Senior Data Analyst on the Justice Navigator project. So I'm here to answer any questions on stats or the results or the analyses we performed.
Thank you, and now we'll open it up for questions.
Okay, I think what we'll do is we will have any members of the public who would like to come up here and ask the folks from CPE a question regarding their study and the outcomes of the study. Is there anyone here from the public who has a question for our guest? Mr. Town Manager?
Mark Ramo, Town Manager. Mr. Graham, I just had a quick question regarding the stats. One of the key findings that was stated in here is that Black drivers were searched 4.2 times as often as white drivers, and there's some more data there. Is there a cutoff on age where it equals or starts to equal? And I guess what I'm getting at is, are younger Black drivers more prone to be stopped, and then that changes as the age group escalates?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do not break down that analysis by gender or by age, and so I can't speak to that directly. But if that's something you're interested in, that's something we can follow up on as we hopefully continue this partnership with you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'd be interested in knowing that data. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Al Mickle?
Al Mickle, 95 Woodvine Avenue. I assume the data for the traffic stops counted only Watertown residents, or did it count everybody that was stopped?
The data was anyone stopped by the Watertown Police Department.
So it doesn't recognize what's happening to our residents then? I can assume that because we live right next to a very large city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mickle. Would any other members of the public here in attendance like to address the CPE Mary and Rosa from our town council.
Good evening. Thank you for your report, and thank you, commission members, for bringing this to the public. I've lived in town for more than 50 years, and obviously policing and the need for the police and how they've acted has changed dramatically over those years. My concern is one that Mr. Mickle just raised, our proximity to Waterbury and the rise in crime in Waterbury, and how close the Oakville section of town where I live is to an area that young people are coming over and breaking into homes and stealing cars and doing all kinds of things that would call on police activity. Is there any way at all that it can be taken into consideration that a town our size, the number of traffic stops might be unusually high, or the calls for assistance of a particular nature are not in line with the number of residents? In other words, are we getting some overflow numbers from a city close by?
So we don't typically compare cities against each other. We're really interested in assessing your community and then hopefully continuing our partnership and assessing progress over time, against your community itself, not necessarily against other communities. So I can't really speak to how you compare to other similarly sized cities or towns. There are some things that we can do. It all depends on what data the police department collects. So if in the data there is an indicator of whether a person stopped as a town resident or not, then we can use that and do some analyses to look at, whether or to what extent people from outside your town are driving some of these stats.
I think that'd be very helpful information just for us to know going forward.
Certainly,
Thank you.
yeah, and that's definitely something we can focus on as we continue this partnership.
Thank you, Mrs. Rosa. Would there anybody else from the public like to address the members of CPE? Folks here in the room? Okay, I think what we'll do is we'll go to questions from our virtual guests, questions on Zoom. If we can have them read off one at a time and have our guest address each one of those individually.
Mr. Chairman, from what I do understand, the chat is not going to work, and they may end up having to raise their hand and ask the question in person.
Okay, so members who are guests who are attending virtually through Zoom, if you could please raise your hand if that's the proper terminology. Raise your hand and you will be, your mic will be turned on and you'll be allowed to ask a question.
Allowed to talk. Okay. Roland Blanchard.
Yes, good evening. Ron Blanchard, 37 Booth Avenue, Oakville, Connecticut. First, I would like to congratulate the Chief of Police and his assistant, Deputy Chief Dominguez, for their efforts in working with the CPE. I think the reports were enlightening. I would raise the question that because there's such a low percentage of Black or Latinx live in the community, but the numbers of stops are higher, I have to agree with Ms. Rosa in that we're getting an overflow from other communities. It would be interesting to see what the time of day these stops were made and the age group, as the town manager said. If it's young people and it's late at night, we've had cars broken into, homes broken into, cars stolen. My wife's car in our driveway was entered. You know, the security cameras show young people wearing hoodies to mute the identity, but they are young people, and I would think that that could be valuable information if that could be determined, the age group, the time of day, et cetera. As a 39-year member of the Watertown Lions Club, I'd like to add that the Lions Club has been in existence for 74 years in our community. And about the same time that the police department became organized, I think we were in 49 and they were organized in 52. We've enjoyed a great relationship with the police department, especially over the past several years. We find the women and men of the Watertown Police Department to be intelligent, articulate, well-trained, well-equipped. Their community relations are second to none. I've personally seen that. We've had the women of the law, the 5 female officers from the department, to a Lions Club meeting where they introduced themselves, described their job descriptions, their reasoning for being law enforcement. We're very, very proud of the Watertown Police Department, all its members and its staff, including the dispatchers and office staff, et cetera. But I do think this is a good thing, and I, again, congratulate the chief and the deputy for pursuing this, and hope that it continues. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, other members of the public who are attending virtual via Zoom, please raise your hand or indicate in some way that you would like to ask a question of our guests from the CPE.
Mr. Chairman, I don't see any more hands raised. Anybody could push the hands raised button, raise hand at the bottom of the screen if they want to talk.
Okay, again, we ask any members of the public who are attending virtually through Zoom, please raise your hand if you wish to speak, and you will be allowed to speak. Your microphone will be enabled. And I think what we'll do at this time, certainly if anyone else attending via Zoom would like to ask a question, we can certainly get back to them. But I would like to open up questions to members of the Police Commission. I have a couple questions, but certainly would give the floor to other members of the commission to ask theirs first. Carmine Verno? No, all set. Okay, so I had a question about the relationship. Obviously, this is just the beginning. The study's the beginning. And I do appreciate that the CPE has agreed to maintain this relationship with the Watertown Police Department because now that we've identified potential areas of concern, obviously now we want to come up with solutions for those concerns, and not just solutions, long-term solutions. And I appreciate the fact that you're willing to enter into a long-term relationship with the Watertown Police Department. Can someone from the CPE speak to that, how that relationship will work, how long you'll be in partnership with the Watertown Police Department, what other services you'll be offering, like perhaps training or further data collection?
Sure. So, I'm sure my other colleagues can speak about our long-term partnership with our agencies. But, one of the things that we like to do, again, is really give your community the tools and this report to have those conversations moving forward. We also like to identify some low-hanging fruit, we like to call here at CPE, where we can identify maybe some either policies that can be possibly changed in the Watertown Police Department for better policing. We also like to possibly identify, excuse me, I had a loss for thought, but how we can push equitable policing forward in the department to give you some ideas. Again, we really don't like to compare police department to police department, but we really like to share information to see what you guys can do better.
Great, thank you. And how will just a follow-up question to that, Mr. Riddick, how will the community be involved in this effort going forward, or will the community be involved, members of the community? I'm a big proponent of involving the community in these efforts. Is that going to be part of this plan?
Absolutely. One of the things we do at the at CPE, we really center the community. We have a community engagement team that identifies organizations your department already partners with, and even some hard-to-reach organizations that they may not partner with. So I think, I have a community engagement background, and I think that is so important to have community members involved in this conversation. Because again, they're really the ones that give their trust to their law enforcement agency and to the town council. So absolutely.
Okay, great. Any other questions from the folks attending via Zoom virtually?
Mr. Chairman, I see no hands raised at this time.
Okay, at this point, I'll turn it back over to Chief Bernegger for some follow-up comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when we entered into this agreement in 2019, at the time Chief Gavalis and I, being very proud of the department that we work for, said, boy, CPE is going to come back and say, man, Watertown Police Department, you guys are great. We didn't find any disparities whatsoever. Keep doing exactly what you're doing. So when they did come back with the disparity that minority drivers were searched at a rate 4 point something times more than non-minority drivers, it was shocking. It was a shocking finding to us that I felt I had to get and understand that data. So working with our records department, we did a pretty deep dive and analyzed every single search of a vehicle that was performed between 2013 and 2020. And these comments are both for the audience here, the public, and for CPE if you want to comment on this as well. Regarding non-minority traffic stops, during the period that was analyzed, we had approximately 10,850 motor vehicle stops with a white driver. Of those, 211 of those vehicles were searched by the police. We can deduct 95 off of that right away that were simply searched due to an inventory search because the car was going to be towed. CPE did not take into account inventory searches. So that leaves 116 searches that were actually analyzed for this study. Of those 116 searches, only 15 were searched due to the officer smelling marijuana coming from the vehicle. And that only accounts for 13% of those vehicle searches. And I bring up the smell of marijuana because during that time period, that was probable cause for an officer to search a vehicle. As we know, the law has recently changed. Marijuana has become legal, and the smell of marijuana is no longer probable cause for an officer to search a vehicle alone. Regarding minority traffic stops, of all minority groups put together during that time period, there were 2,248 traffic stops that had a minority operator. That's Black, Hispanic, Asian, and all other minority groups. There were a total of 71 vehicle searches, 21 of which were inventory searches that we won't include. So that leaves 50 searches of minority vehicles. So we're not talking about large numbers here. That's less than 2 a month, given that entire 8-year time period. Of those 50 vehicle searches, 28 of them were for the smell of marijuana, and that's 56% of them, which was a shocking number for us to look at, saying why are minority stop searches, more than 50% of them were due to the smell of marijuana, where non-minority searches was only 13%. I don't have a clear answer for that right now, although one of, of the discussions regarding the legalization of marijuana was that the marijuana laws were having a disparate impact on our minority communities. This data may lend credence to that discussion. I'd be very interested with the continuing relationship we have with CPE to look at the data moving forward with the change in the law, to see if that change in the law, accompanied with greater awareness of our officers from this study, shows a dramatic difference in the search rate between minorities and non-minority operators. So I did just want to put that information out to the commission and to the public.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chief. And at this time, I would invite members of the CPE, both either here in person or attending virtually, if you'd like to give any concluding comments. Perhaps talk about I'd be interested in next steps, the way forward, if anyone would like to take that.
Sure, absolutely. And, I don't want to monopolize the entire time from my colleagues Eliana and Matt, but one thing I did forget to mention is we also like to identify where the Watertown Police Department and just our agencies, how they can collect better data moving in the future. Obviously CPE has its own standards, how we take data and analyze it and put it through a process to really determine if it is viable to be included in our Justice Navigator assessment. As you see, and you can look on our website, we do for vehicle investigations, pedestrian investigations, which is something that we didn't necessarily do here in Watertown. But again, how we can improve moving forward. So I can now give it over to my colleagues, Eliana and Matt, if they have anything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Evan. I really appreciate the question in regards to community engagement. So just as an FYI, about 2 weeks ago, we had some of our CPE team actually on the ground in Watertown, meeting with some community members, as well as the chief took them on a tour and they did a ride-along. So that is a part of our process on how we get to know the community better. And we're also looking, if the community would like so, we would like to do a roundtable just to hear some community concerns, community feedback, and also solutions on what public safety could look like for them. So that's definitely a next step if that is of interest of you all.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and just in terms of, analytically and longer term next steps, there are numerous pathways we could go. We would like to do a follow-up report to be able to see, as Chief Bernegger mentioned, the change in the law around marijuana. It'd be great to see if that changes the results. And the data that we used for this analysis ended in 2020. So, we've already got 2 years we could use. There are also more intensive one-on-one where we dig into some of those questions that the community raised about, out-of-town residents or time of day, age group, things like that. So that'll really be for the chief and for Evan to kind of discuss which way we want to go, but we do have a lot of options and a lot of expertise. It's just a matter of how your community wants to proceed.
Great, thank you so much. So one final comment that I would add is that I would like to see some qualitative data from members of the public to see how they feel, to see if they feel as though they've been policed in an equitable manner. Of course, the numbers can be all positive, and if members of the public don't feel as though they're being policed in an equitable manner, then we still have a long way to go. Same thing with the safety of the community. Crime data is important, and we can look at crime data. We don't really show a lot of crime here in Watertown, but if we have members of the public who don't feel safe, then we still have some work to do. So I would just ask that you take into consideration some qualitative data via interviews and other means. This has been very enlightening. I do want to thank the chief and deputy chief for taking on this project. It takes a little bit of courage and some moral fortitude to pass over all your information to an independent agency just to, shed some light on how you've been doing and to be able to take some criticism and of course to see what you've been doing right. It appears as though there's a lot that we're doing right also. We should point that out. So thank you again from our guests from CPE. And we do have a member from some CPE here in attendance who folks can see after the meeting. And I forgot your name already, I'm sorry. Kiana is in the back row there, so if you have any other questions after the meeting, I'm sure Kiana would be happy to hear from you. And with that being said, we will move on to old business. And we have under 7A, update on speed reader locations. Chief, has there been any
There's
movement?
no update this month, Mr. Chairman. Our 3 operable speed reader, speed radar signs remain at Middlebury Road, Park Road near Jericho, and Buckingham Street, about midway between John Trumbull School and Polk School.
Great, thank you very much. Item number 8 on our agenda is the chairman's report. Our chairman, Mr. Antonetti, is in attendance virtually. We're happy to hear that he is making a speedy recovery. We're also happy to hear that he is convalescing at home, and we are hopeful that he'll be able to attend the next meeting in person. Number 9, with that, there is no chairman's report. So number 9 on our agenda is the police chief's monthly report and department activity report for February of 2023. Chief, we do have copies of that. Is there anything that you would like to highlight from those reports?
Nothing particular, just would like to announce that we did have a promotional ceremony this afternoon. We promoted Sergeant Jared DeAndrea to the rank of lieutenant, and he will assume command of our detective division. And we have promoted Corporal Jeff McCurrier to the rank of sergeant. He will remain in his current assignment, working on revamping our entire policy and procedure manual, working towards our 2024 assessment for accreditation.
Great.
We are also conducting background investigations on 2 applicants right now. One is a new hire who's likely going to start the police academy on April 6th, and the second is a certified officer from another agency. Lastly, we presented our budget to town council last week. At this time, there are 2 additional police officers remaining in the proposed budget. Also pleased to inform the commission that the council has approved the reallocation of ARPA money, originally allocated for a small upgrade to our communication system, which is no longer necessary due to a grant. That money has been reallocated to fund the Red Dot Optic project, which I briefed the commission on last month. Purchase orders have already been submitted for equipment procurement, so it's moving forward. End of my report.
Excellent. Thank you, Chief. That's all good news. And with that, we come to item number 10, adjournment, which requires a motion and a vote. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned at 8:13 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for attending.